Alright, so I managed to get my hands on this Ground Industries TKP setup, which would have been the equivalent to, roundabouts the MBS Colt setup. So I want to do a little bit of a compare and contrast, and also just kind of get my first impressions of this Ground Industries setup. Alright, so first thing I wanted to do, of course, was take a look at the trucks, and especially I wanted to take a look at the kingpin. If you remember, on the Colt, the kingpin would move and wasn't fixed firmly in place. And you can see that is also very much the case with these Ground Industry trucks. In fact, I would say these might even be worse in that regard. So, what does it mean when the kingpin is loose versus when the kingpin is held very tightly? Well, I can show you that really easily right now. So if you pay attention to the axle, you can see if the board is turning or not, right? So the wheels are pointing straight, and if I lean the board, I have a lot of lean, and you can see I'm getting the board to turn, a little to the right, a little to the left, but I'm getting a lot of lean and not a lot of turn, while at the same time, if I try to have the terrain influence the turning, look at that. The terrain can just knock the steering about all over the place. If we look at the MBS here, so I've soldered the kingpin into the base plate, which is not the best way to do it, but it is a way to do it. You can see I can't lean as far as I could, but look how much the axle is able to turn. And it's not able to do anything without my allowing it to by allowing the deck to move, right? If I am not moving the deck, if I hold the deck stiff, these wheels cannot turn. And if I force the wheels to turn, you can tell it's actually forcing the deck to lean. And I can step on this side, and it's kind of forcing it to correct back to center. So it just has a much more solid connection between what the hanger's doing and what the deck is doing. Alright, so here's the base plate taken off the deck. It's pretty lightweight. It seems to be pretty well cast, but the weird thing here is this is the bolt. This was the kingpin that was in it. And you can see the fit is really, really poor. The bolt can almost free spin without being held in place. So this is what a normal kingpin would look like. With it'd normally be a grade 8 bolt with those 6 lines. It would normally have the smooth shaft here, because that's a little larger than the threads, so it can have a nice tighter fit. So I'm hoping someone changed out the kingpin at some point for whatever reason. If we compare this to the Colt base plate, you can see that they're actually pretty similar in a lot of ways. But here's the kingpin on this one, and here's the kingpin on this one. So I fixed this up so it was nice and tight, like it should be, and that's how much freedom of movement there is in that kingpin. It's quite a lot. If we look at the hangers, you can see that the Colt hanger has a straight kingpin, and the Ground Industries hanger has a bent kingpin. So that means this kingpin bends so that it's pointing in line with the pivot axis. That essentially means you're going to have a different bushing progression, and the straight kingpin is going to bind up sooner and have less range of motion, and the bent kingpin is going to allow for more rotation of the hanger. That is a relatively minor difference. So here's the bushing stack on the Ground Industries truck, and you see it's got the cup washer, the cone bushing, the hanger, and then the barrel bushing. And then it's got this restrictive bushing seat on top. And this is something I want to talk about. This, I think, is kind of more of an older style of doing things. Nowadays, the trend tends to be more You just have a flat bushing seat on the bottom, and if you want it to be restrictive, you use a washer. One of the reasons I think this used to be more common is bushings just didn't used to be as good, and so we relied on cupped washers a lot more. Nowadays the trend tends to be get good bushings, and you want to let the bushings show through, and you can control the lean a lot more with the durometer. And if you want to put limits on it beyond that, you use your cupped washers. Alright, so here's where things start to get radically different between the MBS board and this Ground Industries board. On the MBS board you have a 25-degree truck, and the board has a 15-degree wedge. So you have a total of 40 degrees of turning. On the Ground Industries board you have a 30-degree truck and 30 degrees of wedge. So that's wild for a couple reasons. For one, the more angle you have on the front of the deck, the more drop you have on the deck platform height and the lower your feet are. And in fact, with a 30-degree wedge and trucks that are this short, that ends up being too much of a drop. So 60 degrees is also just an insane amount of turning. So what they do is they actually use a riser pad, and instead of adding more wedge, they are de-wedging the front and taking away 5 degrees of turning. So you end up with a 55-degree turning angle, which is still really high, but a lot more reasonable than 60. So you end up with just this very different and what would be a very aggressive geometry. This thing would be a very, very turny setup. So from this angle, you can really see how much more wedge there is on the Ground Industries board versus the MBS board. And so that does give the Ground Industries board more turning, like I said, but it also does a couple other things. One of them is it makes it so that Ground Industries board ecosystem is compatible with both of their truck styles. You could not put MBS channel trucks on this deck and have it work, but you can put Ground Industries channel trucks on this deck and have it work. The other thing, which I touched on, is it means that this deck is going to be lower than this deck. In fact, it's pretty significant how much lower this deck is. And I would call that, it's not just the height of the deck that's important, it's the height of the deck over the roll axis. So if you imagine, I got this T-square here, if I hold it right in the middle, it's rolling, and the roll axis is in line with the center. But if I pinch it lower, this top surface here is above the roll axis, right? So the height of the roll axis is how far the pivot action of the truck is relative to the height of where your feet are. And the more height over the roll axis you have, the more top mount feel you get. So you're going to have more leverage to control the deck with the MBS board, but you're going to have more stability, and the bushings are going to feel stiffer because you're lacking leverage. So the comparison I guess I would make is this is going to ride more like a drop through, and this one's going to ride more like a top mount in terms of feel. So you've got a turny drop through type of geometry, and you've got a less turny top mount type of geometry here. And that's what the difference is going to be there. So now I want to talk about wheels. The MBS boards come with these wheels, which I don't even sure if they have a proper name. MBS's better boards come with wheels that are like T1 and a T3 and roadies. But these ones are kind of their budget wheels, and I think they're just unnamed. And these wheels are the worst. These wheels suck. If I squeeze these wheels, they are so stiff, like a vinyl hose, and they are so slow. Whereas this Ground Industries board, this actually has the same wheels as their Premier decks do. So here's a spare wheel that hasn't been used. That's one of the Ground Industries wheels. And it is so, it's so ductile and movable and rubbery and soft. And it has energy return. And it doesn't take a lot to squeeze, and it bounces back. This thing is... Ugh. So basically, with the wheels, anything I feel that this board had good going for it is pretty much, in my opinion, negated by how slow these wheels are. You could say that, oh yeah, slow wheels, that means you can do the same big boy terrain, but you're going slower. But it doesn't work out that way. What it means is that you don't carry your speed. You can't continue your runs. You have to be continually going down a steep downhill in order for this to keep speed at all. Whereas wheels that maintain a really good roll speed, they can go down the downhills, but they can also tackle really shallow slopes and do really mellow things. And as things go up and down, they can carry their speed through more terrain types. And so it just makes these wheels hard to take anywhere. The more and more I've ridden, the sadder these wheels make me. And these Ground Industries Mac wheels, they don't make them anymore. You can't get these anywhere. But I think in the riding I've done, across all the wheels I've gotten, these are the fastest wheels that carry speed the best. Last thing I want to talk about, the bindings. Alright, so these MBS bindings. These bindings are simple fabric straps. You can kick in and, you know, they stretch a little bit. The more I use these, the more I actually really like them. I really like just the simplicity of these and the fact that, you know, you can just step on them and they're out of the way, and you can actually ride like this just fine if you want to. It's a little cumbersome, but, you know, if you're wanting to push, you're not having to deal with the bindings in the way nearly as much. It's doable. Whereas these bindings on the Ground Industries, they're kind of like a hybrid between the high quality, you know, real ratchet strap bindings and Velcro strap bindings. They're more built up, they seem to be tougher and more robust, and all of the things that you'd think would make a better binding. But I'm at the point now where I'd kind of either want full-blown real ratchet strap bindings or just simple fabric straps. I just don't like this in-between option of not fabric bindings, not ratchet straps. It's so much more fiddly. It's not easy enough. Being locked in that much is not worth it without the ease of the ratchet straps. If you don't have that ease, I would much rather just have fabric straps like this. Alright, so final thoughts. First off, these are going to have completely different turning characteristics. MBS TKP is going to be a completely different beast than the Ground Industries TKP. If it's set up right and tuned, it's going to be very, very responsive, but the low height over the roll axis should still give you nice, comfortable stability. That low roll axis might mean you don't want to go as fast on it, and you might lose control authority because of how high those angles are. So I'd imagine that this one's going to be just more bulletproof in terms of just charging than this guy is. But the MBS, even tuned up to as best as I can, it's really just not that much fun. unless you're really in the right place on the right trail. This, I imagine, would be much more fun and much more inviting, especially if you're a younger, lighter rider. So the Colt at the time would have been sold for an incredibly cheap price. It's hard to compete with something so cheap, and it tuned up well, and it's one of my favorite boards if all I want to do is just get to the bottom of the hill. It can do that on just about any hill. And this, I'm disappointed that I can't ride it today or tomorrow. I'm gonna have to put more work into it to not just put the right kingpins in, but once I put those kingpins in, I'm gonna have to cut the slop that's still gonna be in there. They're still way too sloppy. But once I get out all that slop and I fix the pivot cup, get that all tight, this board should carve and turn and feel really good doing all that. So I'm excited for what it will be after I put in a bunch of work. So yeah, there we go. That's my impressions and my breakdown and my comparison of the old MBS offering for TKPs and the old Ground Industries offering for TKPs. And these would both be approximately their entry level or kids level gigs. So there we go. Longboard technology, over and out. All right, so a bit of an update. I've cleaned this up and I've did a little bit of tuning up on it, as much as I can do really quickly. I've got it so it's turning a lot more. Oh yeah, that's a lot more than it ever was before. It's probably working better than it has for a long, long time. But having taken it apart and tuned it up, it's become very, very clear that whoever owned this rode it a lot and abused the heck out of it. Because not only did it have the non-standard, non-stock kingpins in there, when I looked at those kingpins and replaced them, I noticed they were actually bent. So whoever was riding this was bending kingpins, breaking the stock kingpins. I don't know what would have happened there. But these aluminum brackets, see how thick that aluminum bracket is? That is not supposed to be bent up like that. At some point, they probably had some crash and their foot yanked the heck out of that and just bent that bracket real good. The reason why this board has these nice tires on it may not be because it came with the nice tires, but because this guy who rode this thing was burning through tires and upgraded and got the nice tires. I've bought a lot of used mountain boards at this point, and most of them look like they've barely been ridden. This is the first board I've gotten that has a real history on it. And I'm betting the reason why it stopped getting used was because the problem with the kingpins, the holes in the base plates for the kingpin had probably worn so big that there was too much slop for the trucks to be workable anymore. So that is just some cool backstory on this board and a bit of a mystery. So I thought that was fun. Longboard technology, over and out.